Hello viewers! In this video I am going to introduce the Datably Stack. The name says it already, it is a stack for RapidWeaver which enables CRUD functionality. CRUD is such an ugly word for something really cool, namely create, read, update and delete of data. Datably requires, of course, RapidWeaver and the Stacks plugin, and once you've got that installed, and of course Datably as well, you can start connecting to your database. Datably supports several database systems, which are MySQL and MariaDB. It's also SQLite3 and PostgreSQL. If you have a look at Datably within RapidWeaver, you will see you have two stacks. One is for the layout and the other one is for the functionality. In this video I'm going to have a thorough look at Datably. First I'm going to introduce the end user interface with everything it has to offer, and then we are going to have a look at the several ingredients like the stacks and substacks of Datably. Once we've gone through that, I am going to develop a new database application, which you can follow step by step because it is also based on the documentation. Lastly, I'm going to show you how to secure your Datably website. All right, let's dive in and have a look what Datably is all about, which starts with a look at the Datably website, which is over here. Oh no, this is RapidWeaver, of course. So this is the Datably website. I'll make it big for you so that you can see something. This is, of course, the introductory page with all the links and a short overview of the functionality. Then, of course, we have the buy page, and then what we need today particularly is the documentation page, or the documentation pages. I encourage you to have a thorough look at the documentation because not all things in Datably are self-explanatory. So first of all, I have a getting started guide, and this is what we are going to follow later on step by step, which gives you a very thorough introduction what to do at which step. Then we also have documentation of each substack. So if you need detailed information about something within Datably, so just have a look here. For example, if you look at the database stack, you get a very long page. Of course, you can scroll up here, which explains each field in depth. And yeah, the same also for the table stack and each column stack's type. Then lastly, we have a chapter which looks at all kinds of security considerations. And last but not least, a page which explains the Datably API. So if you are a developer and you would like to program your own web page, for example, using JavaScript, you can tap into the Datably API. However, this video will not cover the Datably API because it will really be too much to watch in one sitting. Anywho, I will, because this video will be a long one anyways, give you jump marks below as good as I can. So if you are interested in a certain thing or you want to jump back to something or forwards, you can do that easily. I'm trying to make it as non-linear as possible, but sometimes I have to build knowledge on knowledge. So bear with me there. If you think I'm talking too slowly, then if you are watching this on YouTube, of course, use the YouTube feature to speed up this video. Then I'm also talking faster and it's over faster. All right. Let's first have a look at what the end user sees and what we can do here. All right, let's have a look. Before that, however, a little word of caution. If you are testing your Datably page, you have to remember that not all things can be displayed properly inside RapidWeaver. For example, RapidWeaver doesn't allow standard JavaScript pop-ups to be displayed. It just swallows them and you think, why am I pressing this button and nothing happens? So I suggest if you want to preview a page, you can of course do that with the preview button, but to get the full experience like the end user will have it, you should always preview your page either in Safari or in your preferred web browser. So I am going to show this now in Safari. File, preview, page in Safari. And this is what the end user sees. Let's first have a look at the table itself. We have it in what is called striped mode. Then I have also turned on a feature which makes it obvious on which row the mouse cursor is, and also you can see that I have enabled the grid view, which can all be turned on or turned off according to your preferences. Then each column can be sorted. The initial sort column is marked with this blue triangle. I can just change the sorting order according to my liking. I can do that for each and every column. And I can also sort multi-column. All right. Then next up is the search functionality. For example, if we want to find our colleague with first name Gavin, for example, I can filter like this. I can filter basically for everything I like. For example, if I wanted to know who is located in Tokyo, I can just type in Tokyo and I get Dan. All right. Then next, I can determine how many entries are being shown in the table. I can do this as the end user and can just select, for example, I want to see 50. Although I only have 14 entries in this table, so everything is being shown now. So let's go back to 10, because I want to show how the pagination works, which is down here. So this is the, you can have the pagination in different styles. This is one of them, which gives you the first and previous, next and last buttons, and of course pages you can directly jump to. Then also down here at the bottom is a kind of an indicator where in the table you currently are. And now let's have a look at the different buttons which are presented here. One word about the buttons: I can individually turn them on and off according to the functionality which I want to give to my end user. So the first one is labeled column visibility, and it does exactly what the label says. I can turn on and off certain columns. Like for now, I only have the first 3 columns enabled. And if I want to re-enable them, of course, I just click there again and re-enable them. If you want to get out of this view, you just click anywhere in this gray area. Then we have the copy button. And once it is clicked, the entire table contents is copied into your clipboard. Then, of course, we have CSV, which creates a file with comma-separated values. Then we have the PDF button, which creates a PDF file. Let's just quickly click on it. It is put immediately into the Downloads folder. And let's have a look. Here it is. Of course, I haven't styled the page and site names, but that would be visible here now. All right. Let's jump back to the view. Then we have the print button, which opens the standard operating system print dialog, and then I can just print my table contents, and I can start it with the normal print driver. All right, then we have the 3 most important buttons: New, Edit, and Delete. If I click on New, I get a pop-up which helps me to enter my data. This is a very important thing. As a developer, you don't have to take care of this. This is all done for you in the background and mostly automated. All right, so what does the end user have to do? Basically just enter the relevant data. The mouse cursor, of course, highlights the current line, and the mandatory fields are indicated by this asterisk. Okay, there are also a few features which make sure that mandatory fields are filled in. For example, if I click on save without entering anything, and we know last name is a mandatory field, I'm getting a warning and an invitation to fill in this field, and the field itself is highlighted. We also have a date time picker. So this is only currently a date field, but if there would be time with it as well, there would be also an add-on which allows me to enter the proper time. And then lastly, of course, the save button, which then saves the data to the database. If the end user decides, well, he's had enough of it and he doesn't want to save anything, he can just press this X. In order to edit a record, I have to click on a row with my mouse or tap on it, and then it is marked as you can see here. And then I can click on the edit button, and of course the data is presented the way we see it here. Same functionality as before with a new save or just jump out of it. And lastly, we have the delete button, which works similarly to edit. I have to mark the row which I want to delete, click on delete, and then go past this pop-up, which makes sure that I'm not deleting something which I didn't want to. This is basically the main interface for the end user. And by the way, there are also a few other goodies. For example, the end user can reorder the positions of the columns according to their liking. And there is also an option to basically save the end user's configuration in a cookie. So once the end user comes back, he will find this layout just as he left it. This much about the little demo, how things are presented to the end user. As you can see here in RapidWeaver, Datably consists of a lot of several stacks and substacks, although you only see two in your library. So let's quickly get started with what does what, and then afterwards I'm going to create a completely new web page together with you according to our getting started workflow. But first of all, let's have a look what we see here. We have Datably, the stack which brings with it the theme. The theme is there to basically bring in the basic styling and the basic components of Datably. Datably itself is completely framework agnostic, so it will work with any framework, Stacks framework which is on the market. I will demonstrate how it works with in conjunction with my platform framework, but it will work with anything else as well. So also we have in the layout the database stack, which is of course very important, and you can also see certain information always in the edit mode. The same applies to the table stack, which tries to give you as much information about the configuration as it can, because sometimes you just don't have that the inspector for the table stack available. If you, for example, looking at the database and you want to quickly know which buttons are enabled. Also inside the table stack we place the columns, of course, because we're trying to basically rebuild the database table as good as we can inside of Stacks or RapidWeaver. I think it is very important that you also open something which helps you to have a look at your database or table structure. For MySQL and MariaDB, it's PHP MyAdmin. I have installed it on one of my machines exactly at the point where I also have my database installed. Let's hop over to phpMyAdmin and log in. If you use different databases like SQLite3 or Postgres, I have links for that in the documentation page. Just click on documentation itself and scroll down where you find these links. For example, here I have the link to phpMyAdmin if you need that. For Postgres, there is also a product which is called pgadmin, and also for SQLite there is phpLiteAdmin. So follow their instructions and you will get a similar experience as what I'm showing here with my MariaDB actually. So I have a table which is called employees, and we're gonna build a little bit a system which uses these fields which we see here. Let's go back to RapidWeaver and back to the column stacks. Also here in the column stacks in edit mode, I'm also trying to give you as much information about the column itself because sometimes you just are working on this basic column and you want to know how you configured another one, and you don't want to just jump there to get the inspector going. So there's also lots of information for you as the developer. But now let's jump in and see how we create our first Datably application step by step. Okay, now let's first create a new page, a new stacks page. And as I said before, Datably is framework agnostic. However, I'm going to demonstrate it together in conjunction with my platform framework. So let's hop over to platform and first drop in our platform settings stack. This gives us now a basic layout with proper font and spacing and all these things. Now back to Datably itself. I'm then putting in the Datably stack with the theme. Currently we only have one theme, but there will be more, and these will then be specific to certain frameworks on the market. Currently we are using, as I said, the default theme, which is completely neutral. Next up, we just drop in our Datably database stack. It automatically creates a substack which is called Datably table, and we can have as many tables per database stack as we like. You might also wonder, what if I want one database stack and several tables but styled differently, because right now one styling would fit all the tables. This is possible, and once I have my database stack here, what we need later on is this information, the stack ID. And if I want to basically tear off this table from my database stack, I start the tear off mode, enter the name here, stacks in _6, and now I can go and tear off this table. And all tables which contain this DB stack ID, in this case stacks in 6, will refer to this database connection. Very cool, but this is already a little bit too advanced for what I actually wanted to show you. So let's just drop this table stack and create a new one. And let's start with connecting to our database. This is the first thing we have to do. Okay, I said we are going to connect to MariaDB. MariaDB driver is identical to MySQL, so there is nothing we have to change. The host name. We can either use a fully qualified domain name or an IP address. In this case, it will be an IP address. Then the port number. If you don't know, or if you didn't change anything, the default value will be exactly what you need. In my case, I know my database is running on port 3307. Then the database name, we find that in phpMyAdmin, is called Datably. The username is also Datably. I know that. And the password is this one. Unfortunately, Stacks doesn't offer a password entry field, so this is unfortunately always visible what we have here. Then we have allow origins. This is a feature which is called CORS. This is in good old English, cross-origin resource sharing. If you want to read up on it, Google CORS and you will find a lot of very good information. But CORS is notoriously difficult to debug, and that's why we have allow origins all as a default. And once you feel comfortable with CORS, you can enable the other more stringent modes. But for now, all is fine. By the way, everything I'm doing right now is also reflected in the documentation, in the Getting Started guide. As you see, we have already worked with the theme stack. Currently, we are working with the database stack. And next step will be the table stack. So if you want to follow this step by step, you can just go according to this documentation. You can go previous and next and read up what I'm doing here in parallel. By the way, it also explains how to work with the databases, and it also has a small information about how to deal with SQLite3. Okay, let's hop back to the database stack and stay with these allowed methods. This is a security feature, and you can turn on and off each feature individually. So you can have a database, a table displayed where you can only delete data. Yeah, doesn't make much sense, but yeah, this will just as an example of what you can do. And if you turn all off, then it's just a read-only view which you are presenting to the end user. Of course, since we are working with a database API at this point, this also has to be reflected later on in the table stack. But this is very important because actually we are opening up our database to the world, and we have to be pretty restrictive so that intruders or malicious people don't destroy our data. In the same vein, there is also, let me just reactivate this because we are going to operate a full CRUD interface. But in the same vein, we also have these other two features. If you are running your Datably application behind a reverse proxy, please enable this checkbox. And you have also an application firewall which you can configure. Here you can enter either IP addresses in CIDR form so that you enable or disable entire networks, or you can enter individual IP addresses. And lastly, there is this text which says that you have to republish your project once you have changed anything in this section. Why is that? Because we are the Datably API is based on PHP, and we need this API file on our server to actually tap into it and connect to the database. This is why in the documentation we have this section, step 3, complete your project data. And it tells you to click on General and fill in the web address of your project. Let's do that quickly. I click on General, and here we have our web address. This is going to be in my LAN, that's why it's not HTTPS, and it's on one of my test servers. And I've already created this file structure so that actually we can easily and quickly publish this site. Before we do that, I am going to hop over to the page which you are just creating, and I'm configuring this as our new folder. We can just leave that, or you can just say, call it, for example, demo, so that you get a proper information, and you can navigate easily. I just said publish site, and I noticed that only 8 files have been updated or saved to the server. This is one of the problems if you have a PHP-based page or site. Sometimes it is really necessary to use republish all files to make sure that everything which you changed or adjusted is also being reflected then later on your server. Otherwise, you are testing something and it doesn't work, and you really can't determine and find out what the error is. So republish all files, and most problems will disappear. All right, this actually concludes the database stack, and let's just jump over to the documentation page. We have just published the whole thing. I have explained the course settings earlier. I have explained the different methods and how to turn them on and off. And I have also explained the security features. Now we have reached our next step in setting up our Datably site. It is the table stack. As I've already explained, the table stack represents a table on the database. And this is why we have to give it a few bits of information so that Datably can retrieve the data properly. Let's go to step 1 and set the table information as requested here. First, we need the table name, exactly as it is on the database, and then we need its primary key. I suggest to really follow this tip, which is lined out in blue here. And this means that the primary key for a Datably website should always be a self-incremented integer field. That makes things so much easier, because just imagine if your primary key was the last name in our employees example, then the person who enters new data would always have to remember which last names are already in the table. Otherwise, if he repeats or she repeats the entry, there would be an error. To avoid that, we use a self-incrementing integer field as the primary key and take it from there. If you want to have another unique column, most, or actually all databases offer unique indexes, and I would suggest to use one of these for that. All right, let's have a look over in phpMyAdmin. We will have to log on again. There we are. Let's hop over to the Datably database and look at the employees table. The structure is over here, and you see ID with this golden key icon next to it. This is our primary key. So let's go over to RapidWeaver, click on the Datably table stack, and as you can see, I've already filled in the table name employees and given it the primary key ID. To the next elements in step 1, we have to decide which features we are going to use, and we have to check the translation section and the initial sort. Finally, we have the grouping and the tear-off mode. So let's go over there to actually have a look at it. We have, as I said, the features. We can decide whether to only display data, which would mean read-only. And on the other side, we have the full CRUD functionality. In our example, we will leave it on CRUD because I want to show how to enter, update, and delete data later on. Next up, we have the section with the translation. The translation stack is an extra segment in our tutorial, so let's just keep it very short. If you want to use a translation, you can later on click on custom and enter locale here to enable the translation. And once you click on custom and enter a locale, for example DE, you will see here in the development view, in the edit view, sorry, the indicator for the locale has been updated as well. So you can always keep an eye on this, even if you don't have the inspector for the table stack on. But for now, let's turn off the translation. Then we have initial sort. I've already entered the column name here because I want to initially sort by last name. So again, here the column name must be exactly in the same writing, in the same way as it is on the database. Next up, we can also implement a grouping. I will not use this now because this will actually go way beyond the scope of this video. If you need more information about this, there is a section about it in the specific table stack documentation. Lastly, in this step, there is the tear off mode. I've already started to explain it in conjunction with the database stack. You remember when we were over there, I had this stack ID here, stacks_in_6, which I have always in this edit mode displayed. And over in the table stack, I can use this information in the tear off mode. So for example, if I wanted to tear the table stack out of the database stack, I can do this by entering stacks_in_6. And I can tear this table off the database stack into an open area, and there will always be the relation between this database stack and the table stack. So I can actually put in many more table stacks and have them independently of the single database stack on this page. And of course that means I can individually format each table stack the way I like it. But let's for now stick with one table stack and not use the tear off mode for now. I want to keep it as simple as possible for you, because then it's easier to follow my explanations. Table stack, step 1 done. Let's quickly check over on the documentation page what's up now. Now we have to configure the modal window for editing and adding data. As the hint in blue says, this section is only available if the CRUD option is active. I show you quickly. Here we have the modal section, and if I turn off CRUD by setting it to read only, the entire section disappears. All right, let's have a look at the modal. First of all, we have the checkbox Show Modal in Edit. Right now it is not visible and there is no indication how to actually otherwise display it. So let's activate the modal window here by setting this checkbox. And now you see a sample entry form. This is pretty much what it is going to look like on the final web page. And the only thing you can actually do with this modal window at this point is to place a button here. Let me just remove the existing button so you can see we have a drop zone for a button. And if we stay with my platform framework, I use the platform button. I place it in here. You could use any other button you like. You can also use the standard button, which comes with Stacks. It doesn't matter as long as it's either a button or a link. Everything's fine. So what you have to do with this button is very simple. You just have to format it. Give it a proper text, like in this case, save, and give it an alignment, like here, center, and that's all there is to do. You don't even have to set a link. You don't even have to omit a link, nothing. Let's just leave it like that. Now back to the table stack. How do we get back there? I just click into an area which is not the modal window, and I'm back on the table stack, and I can deactivate this checkbox and the modal window disappears. Now I can also format the date section for the modal window. If I know I have a date or date time field in there, I can actually give it the necessary format. You just select whether it's date or date and time, and then you can, if you need to, adjust the date input and the date output format if you need to. Lastly, we have the z-index for the model. If you have something on your page which interferes with this model window, you can adjust the z-index accordingly so that it is actually not overlapped by anything else or conflicts with something you have on your page. You've earlier seen in the section where I was talking what the end user can see, you have seen these buttons. You can activate them and deactivate them individually. Colvis is always active, but you can also turn it off if you don't want it. One more thing about this area here in the edit node. You have a specific indicator for the button zone so that you always know, even in edit mode, which buttons will be displayed later on. So if you activate the Colvis, there is an indicator here, and if you turn it off, it disappears. The same applies to copy, CSV, PDF, and print. The inline button just makes sure that these buttons are presented in line with other elements of the table. If you turn it off, the buttons will be in a separate row. But I like it better inline. Then you can also set the table layout individually to your liking. You can have the border around the fields to set to none, for example. That's very simple and straightforward way of presenting it. Then you can have a cell grid or just indicate each row with a line above and below it. Then there are several other options for the display of the data. For example, you can have a hover option where it actually shows you over which line or which row your mouse cursor hovers. Then you can indicate the order column if you want that. There's always, by the way, this little pop-up which explains which selection performs. You can, of course, influence the scroll area, like if you have more data than what fits on your on the page, that you can influence the scroll behavior. You can just test it out, play with it. There's nothing you can do wrong with this. Then we have a few more options, like for example the info option. As this little pop-up display tells you, there will be an indication how much and which data sets of the entire table you are looking at. You can turn on and off the search field. You can enable and disable the entire ordering. You can enable and disable multiple row ordering. So if you press the Shift key and at the same time click on ordering, on the ordering function of a column, you can actually include more and more columns into your ordering scheme. Then you can also turn on and off the column reordering so that basically you can drag and drop columns into a certain order on the final page in any way and sequence. Then lastly, we have in this section the fixed header. This works pretty much like I think the power bar of in platform. So if you scroll your page and the table header hits the top of the page, it is fixed there and the data scrolls underneath. Then we have the column layout, which is pretty nifty. It actually is the layout for all columns in the table. However, if you need a different alignment horizontally for the header or the cells, you can override this on a column basis in the column stack itself. Then you have the different options for the responsive behavior. I'm not going to go into this detail now. Just play with it, check it out and see how it works, and then you can select the mode which you like most. Then we have the pagination settings. You can turn on and off the pagination per se, and once it's turned on, you have a lot of options to style it. There are plenty of ways to have the navigation buttons detailed. Then you can set the initial page length. If you have the size selector, which is below selected, you can actually give the user an option to override this and use his own size selection. And lastly, we have the extra section where you can use the font, style and style settings or stacks in platform or even of my Gutenberg stack, if you don't have platform, so that you can actually give the table an individual font set which is different from the entire page which you're designing, or a specific style set according to your requirements. This was the table stack. Next we are going to look at the column stacks. Before we turn to the column stacks, I would like to show you in the documentation where you can get detailed information about the table stack. This is via the documentation, and then you select Datably table, and here you have a documentation about each and every feature which I have built into the table stack. For example, you can also get information about the column selection, which is a very cool feature. Just read about it, check it out, play with it, and about the filtering scheme, which is a very powerful thing. Then we can also read up on all the other options like the tear-off mode, the modal, which I touched quickly, even with the date type settings, the buttons, the table layout, the scroll behavior, which I just glossed over quickly. Then also all the other behavior changing checkboxes, which I have in the table stack, and the entire layout of the pagination and the extras. Now definitely next up are the column stacks. Okay, we've ended here on the documentation page of the table stack. Let's go back to getting started. And table stack was step 4. Now we have step 5, column stacks. I am starting with the basic column stack because this is the core building block for all other column stacks which are available. Let's quickly have a look at your selection or the choice of column stacks which you have. You just click on this plus button and you get this drop down with all your options. Of course, the first one, as I said, the core building block for all column stacks is the basic column. HTML column is very similar to it, has no extra settings, but is made to display HTML formatted or HTML pages or elements. Then next we have Markdown column, so you can display a column which contains Markdown data properly the way it's supposed to be. Then we have a number column for number formatting. We have a money column with specific money related settings. We have a date time column, which brings up, for example, in the add and edit mode of the modal window, the date time picker, for example. Then we have an image column, the link column, the meter column, and lastly the Progressbar column. The last element in this dropdown is the translation stack, which helps you to translate your headlines and everything which makes up the table texts into a different language. All right, let's first have a look at the basic column stack. What do we see here in edit mode? First, here on the edit side, you have a little table which gives you all the key information about this stack without having its particular inspector open at a time. So with one little glance you can see what you have configured. Let's now start configuring this column. The field name has to be exactly as it is on the database, and this will be the last name field. All right. Then we can give it a different field title. This is what the end user sees. So this will be last name. This field will be visible, it will be editable, and it will have a max length. Speaking about the maximum length, this should be exactly as it is defined on your database. So if we look here in phpMyAdmin, for example, last name is Varka255, so we could actually give it a maximum length of 255 characters. It will be orderable, it will be included in the search, and of course it is very important, so we set the required mark. Now for column layout, we could actually override the one from the table stack. We can influence the horizontal alignment of the header. We can influence this horizontal alignment of the cell itself, and we can also influence the vertical alignment. For example, if we have a field which takes up lots of vertical space, like for example an image, we can make sure that the text which is next to it or in other fields in the same row is vertically aligned, for example in the middle. Let's turn this off again. Then we can also influence the responsive behavior. This goes in conjunction with the settings which you have in the table stack, and I did not go into much detail. I would just like to refer you to the documentation at this place, because honestly this will really lead beyond the scope of this video. Then you can also set a particular sizing in terms of the width, and you can set the column width in several units of measurement, which is pixels, percent, EMs and rems. So then whatever you do here, you just say, for example, 100 pixels wide the column will be, says Yoda. Okay, let's just leave that on default by turning it off again. And just like with the table stack, we also have our extras, like where you can use the font and style stacks from Platform or from the Gutenberg stack. Okay, let's just drop in another basic column and recap what we did. First comes the field name like it is on the DB. That was in this case first name. And then we give it a title which is visible to the end user, first name. Okay, these settings will be the same. Let's quickly look about how long it is. This is 255 characters, sorry, 255. It will be orderable, it will be included in the search, and it will also be required. The rest we leave open. Now let's have a look at a few more different kinds of stacks which we have built in. For example, the HTML column. Everything the same like with the basic column. There is nothing which we would actually have to do differently. So this will be the field name. Let's have a look what it is called on the database. It's called HTML. HTML. And I'm very creative and say it's also going to be displayed as capitals HTML. It will be visible, it will be editable. And we saw just now the length was 1024. It will be orderable, searchable, but not really required. That's very cool. One word for users of the platform framework. If you use this table, this column stack in conjunction with platform, just enter as custom CSS class content. That's all you have to do. So now we can take our first glimpse into our table. And we see I have turned on all the available buttons. We have a last name and a first name field, and we have an HTML field. Let's put a few more columns into our table. This is now getting interesting. For example, let's have a look at the Markdown section. Just like before, we quickly have a peek into our database, or the table definition in phpMyAdmin. Markdown, similar thing like with HTML. Field name on the database is Markdown. Markdown to display. We've seen that it was 1024 characters long, and like with the HTML column, we enter the CSS class content if we are using platform. Let's have a look again. There we are. We have success Markdown here. Oh, with a typo. Okay. Good. Let's go on and put on a few more interesting fields, like for example the money column. This is now with specific add-ons for the display of money-related information. This field, I know what it's called on the database, is salary, and will also be displayed as salary. Okay, we leave it as it is, and it will be required, of course. Salary is very important. And then we have the formatters, like the decimal symbol, the thousand symbol, the precision, and the currency. In our case, we don't like euros, we like dollars. Let's have a look. There we are, and we have the salary column in the display. So now it would be nice if we had the salary not aligned to the right, but rather to the left. So then we go and say override alignment. We tell it to align the cell content to the right, and there we go. Okay, let's go on and check out, for example, the HTML column and the Markdown column, and put in something like, for example, the date time column. Let's have a quick look in PHPMyAdmin for the naming. That was start date. Okay, let's call it start date. And here as well, start date. Okay. And it won't be required, and so on and so on. And here at the bottom, like with, for example, the money column, we have date time related specific settings. We can enter a default value. We can decide whether it's date or date time. We can select and format the input format. Okay, let's have a look at the result. Okay, we have the start date. We have the here. Now it would be really nice if the start date would be centered. Let's quickly do that. Center aligned. Here we go. Now let's hop over to something completely different, which is the image column. Here it is. We can display images. However, I need to tell you that we do not save images in the database table. The reason is databases are not made to store and retrieve image data or binary data. File systems are much better suited and actually made for that. That's why we actually only save links inside the database table in that case. So let's have a look in the definition. What we have here, it's called image. Image, okay. Then we also display it as image and give it the full length so that we can properly save links in here. It will not be required, and so on and so on and so on. So let's just have a quick peek at the result, and you can see I have loaded an image and it's fairly big. So what can we do here? As you can see, I have created a specific section called sizing, and I can override the image width or the image height or both. So I'm just going to reduce the image width. 0 pixels is maybe not really enough. Let's do it to 250 pixels, and you can see the result immediately. Obviously, Franz Hubert also had something which has been since removed. So if you have something in your table, you have to really make sure that the link also works. All right, let's now quickly have a look at at Harry's image and click on Edit. And here you can see that the image is consists basically of the link to the image, HTTPS, and so on and so on and so on. Then there are a few more interesting column stacks, like for example the link column. It's the same story like with image. We are storing a link. And quick look in PHP-MyAdmin for the definition. It's called link in this writing, L-I-N-K, and we call it link on the table as well. And it is 255 characters long. Not required, nothing. As you can see, I have created a specific link section for this column stack. And first of all, we can enter a default value. So if there is nothing entered in the specific database record or table record, we can have this default, which will be, for example, ix.de. So let's have a look quickly. You can see this default value is basically replacing any empties in here. Okay, next up, what else can we do? We can give it a placeholder, which could be static, and then you will see the word link instead of the plain old URL. Voila, link, and then of course this will branch off to the URL, which is behind the link itself. Then you can also reference a different column, for example. So if you want, for example, let's say the last name instead of the URL, you will see the last name instead of the URL or the static link or the default value. And as the last option, we have a target. So if you want if the user clicks or the visitor clicks on the link, if you want it to open in a new tab or in a new browser window, you can enter or leave that underscore blank in here. Otherwise, you can just take it out and then it will open in the same tab or in the same window. That was the link stack. I'll just create a little bit more space by removing these stacks. Let's now have a look at the two special ones, which is the meter column. And you can set a minimum and a maximum. Let's set this to, I think, 10,000. And then you can have a low, high, and optimum. And let's have a look at what this is going to look like. A little bit odd. Oh yeah, it helps if you enter a field name. All right, let's use something like, for example, this number field. Number, and here as well, number, whatever. So it doesn't matter. And let's just set this to 10,000. Now we have an interesting indication of where the levels are. I think this should be 3,333. This is going to be 6,666. And this is going to be 8,000. There we go. Now we have a proper staging or staging of our figures. Look, Ken has achieved something. I don't know what. Okay, this is the meter stack, or the meter column stack rather. And now let's have a look at, let's delete this one for now, at the last one in the row, which is the Progressbar column stack. So this is going to be also the number and progress. All right, it can all stay here. And for the formatter, the stack-specific formatter, we have a maximum value. This is 10,000 in our case. And now let's have a quick look at the results. Here you have a kind of a progress bar. Also quite nice. In terms of the column stacks, this is all I have to, or all I want to present in this video. Let's at the last element, let's have a look at the translation. I mentioned this earlier already, and I have tried to make translation as simple and straightforward as possible. First of all, once you drop this translation stack in here, you see indicator for a locale, which is currently empty. So if you wanted to translate the text of the table into something like a German, we would give this the locale DE. You see, it has also reflected here. So you can have several table translation stacks here, one for DE, one for French, one for whatever. And then you can connect it with your table by turning on the translation feature. And I've already entered this before, you may remember, and entering the locale, the same locale, which you want to use for this table stack here as well. So let's go back to the localization or translation. Add row. I'm quickly translating a few buttons and things into German so that you can see the result. Neu, löschen, wirklich, löschen, Kopie und drucken. Let's not do too much because it will just cost time. And if I hop over into the preview, you will see immediately the result. I have Kopie here, drucken, neu, löschen, everything which I entered here. A few words for the more complex texts. There are also macros in here, like for example, showing _start_start. This is the first element, and to end is the last element of total. So you leave these macros, just translate what's necessary. Zeige, start bis von. Und hier habe ich, sorry, and there it is in German. Zeige 1 bis 10 von 14. Oh ja, das mit den Entries müssen wir vielleicht noch übersetzen. Das habe ich übersehen. I've overlooked this. Einträgen. Here we are. It's very difficult to do both languages at the same time. And sometimes I just open the wrong drawer. Sorry for that. Anyways, this is also the little documentation of the translation stack. More about that also in the documentation page. Now, lastly, I would like to talk about the security and protecting your data from unwanted visitors. You know, if you are putting a full CRUD enabled page out there, you will have certain people who, let's put it friendly, would like to improve your data. Most of the time you don't want that because their idea of improvement is maybe not your idea. So I have an entire section about security on the Datably webpage, under documentation and security considerations. I suggest you look at this page quite thoroughly and investigate which method is the best for you. However, I would like to introduce the preferred way of protecting the data, and this is our Gatekeeper stack. Let's just hop over to the Gatekeeper webpage, and it says already confidential data behind lock and key with time-based one-time passwords. You can read up about Gatekeeper on this particular web page. It's gk.navigeo.io, or follow the link. I will sell Gatekeeper in a bundle with Datably, so you can save a few bucks if you buy them together. There's also a video and a demo page, and also, as you know it from my products, a thorough documentation. Anyways, let me quickly demonstrate how you can protect very quickly a Datably web page with Gatekeeper. So I have put Gatekeeper into a separate folder in my library, in my stacks library, so it's easier to find. Gatekeeper consists of 3 stacks, but we will only use the first one in this example. I am putting Gatekeeper onto the page right at the top as the first stack. One little tip, if you are tired of scrolling past this huge thing, you can actually mark it and click on hide. Then it is a very small thing and only represented by this by its title. But you still have full access to its inspector. Gatekeeper doesn't have a preview on its own. So if I have this preview section turned to off, it will just not show up anything in my on my page. By the way, let's just quickly format the table a little bit so that it doesn't look so terrible as it does right now. Just give it a nice padding like this. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's already much better. Now back to Gatekeeper. As I already mentioned, we have several preview options, and the first one which we need is the secret key generator. Why? Because the secret key right now sits on change on install, which means change the secret key. So I'm clicking on this option now and then activate the preview. Now we have a secret key generator here, and don't worry, this will never be published to your productive web page because it's only available in preview. And you don't even have to turn it off. If you forget to turn it off, really it just does not appear anywhere. So let's generate a secret key. You can click on this as many times as you like. The secret keys are generated locally on your computer, so they don't. No one on the interwebs can actually see what you're doing here. So these are really secret keys. So let's use this one. Double click, copy it, and to the clipboard. Now I can go over here to the secret key entry field and paste it in. So now we have our secret key thingy. Next, we use the sync page because somehow we have to sync it with our authenticator. I'm now going to use Authy as an example. I'm going to open Authy, and I am going to ignore this pop-up, and I'm going to add a new account and tap on Scan QR code. Hold it up, it has been scanned, and right now it says issuerexample.com, and it's Bob, of course. You can change this to whatever you like, but if you forget to do it, it is not a big thing. It is only for the sake of basically ordering it inside your countless entries in your authenticator. You can also change this string. Let's just put, for example, Alice in there and then save it. And now we can use this entry later on. Okay, let's turn this stuff off and go through Gatekeeper a little bit further. The Gatekeeper ID is something which you need in conjunction with the Stackkeeper stack, which is beyond the scope of this video. So look, if you're interested in more detail, just check out the Gatekeeper video itself. Then we have the expiry. You can change this to anything you like, days, hours, or minutes. Right now, this way it's set to expire in 1 day. Then we can redirect the login. We don't have to do this right now in our configuration. We don't have to redirect on logout either. A cookies message, if the end user has disabled cookies on his browser, it will not work properly, and this is the message they get. Then the page title and so on, we can reconfigure Gatekeeper completely according to our requirements. Let's just leave it as it is because I just want to demo how to quickly protect this page. Let's have a look at the page so that when I go over to it on our final web page, that I also can find it. It's called Demo. Gatekeeper, just as Datably, is based on PHP, and to make it work, we have to publish it to our final page. That's why I say publish site. This makes a few more elements to be published. Doesn't matter. And now we can actually have a look at our page in the web browser together with Gatekeeper. So bear with me while I'm bringing up the web page. Here we are, and we have Gatekeeper here. One more word about Gatekeeper. It protects your data very thoroughly. So even if there is somebody who says, very easy, I can just quickly go and look at the source code of this page and filter out the data. No, unfortunately, Gatekeeper, or fortunately rather, Gatekeeper makes sure that the data is only loaded once I've entered a valid passcode here. Here we are with Authy, the authenticator, and I tab on example.com with Alice, and Alice token is 152550. 152550. And here we are with our final result. So if we wanted to be really thorough, we would actually place a logout button somewhere below here, which I can do very easily. I will just go back to Gatekeeper and use a sign out stack, which I can place wherever I like, maybe below the table. It just doesn't matter really. And also, like with other button stacks which I'm using, you can use any button or link stack which you have or which you prefer. Just drop it in, format it, give it a proper text, like for example log out, format it or give it a little alignment, give it a different color so it stands out a little bit. I don't know what, let's use this one, and publish again. Now we can refresh this page and we should see a logout button. And when I now click on the logout button, I'm being straight away returned to the Gatekeeper login page. You've now seen how easy it is to protect your valuable data using the Gatekeeper stack. This brings me now to the end of this video about Datably. As you can see, I'm already wearing a different shirt than at the beginning of this video, not because I was sweating so much, but because of the time in between. So a few days went past from starting the video to bring in all the content, to cutting it, and now coming to the conclusion. I hope you enjoyed it, although it is more than an hour long, and I also hope that it was informative and that you at least liked it, or maybe it was even fun watching it. If this is the case, please consider liking this video or even subscribing to this channel, then you don't miss any of my future videos, because there might also be a few about Datably. Thanks again for watching, and bye for now.